everybody, and welcome to the Wild Wahine. This is Kaylani, and this is your Astro Forecast for this week, November 22nd through the 28th. We bring you this Astro Forecast so that you can have a breakdown of some of the energies that are going to be going through the week. I'd like to highlight a couple of things that I think are most important so that you can use this information to make fantastic choices in your life. So let's get started. We actually don't have a lot this week. There's only like a couple of things that I think are like going to be the most impactful. We're going to talk a little bit about what's coming up for the next week because we're going to be feeling that energy over the weekend. And of course, a lot of the energy that we had, at the ending of the week and through the weekend, we had an eclipse last week. We also had Mars as opposition to Uranus that we were feeling still well into the weekend and also at the beginning of this week. So if you didn't watch that video, make sure you go and watch that video. It's last week. I'll make sure I link it above, or I'll link it someplace in the linky spaces, whether you're watching this on Instagram or YouTube. So let's jump into what's going on for this week. So we're going to be talking mostly about Mercury entering the sign of Sagittarius. We're also going to be talking about the Sun conjunct Mercury, and we'll be talking about Neptune stationing direct and Mars trining Neptune. So let's start with good old Merc. So Mercury will be entering the sign of Sagittarius November 24th through December 12th. So as we have stated before, Mercury rules our communication, how we think, our minds, how we process information and dissect information, how we exchange information back and forth, also how we exchange money and commerce. It has a lot to do with like short-term travel, short-term information that we need. So it can be like a quick study of something or a quick workshop or something like that, nothing really long-term. And just our everyday to-do lists and our like going to the grocery store, picking up the kids, doing that, like whatever those things are to you, those are all kind of sort of mercurial things. They're specific, they're detailed, and they're kind of personal. So Mercury is in the heavens, it's on Earth, it's in the underworld, in an archetypal sense is a psychopomp. So it's going between the worlds and it's sharing messages and sharing information so that everything is interconnected. Mercury is neither benefic or malefic. It just kind of sort of depends on where and who Mercury is hanging out with, and that is the energy that it takes on. So Mercury in the sign of Sagittarius, which is Jupiter ruled, and it's a fire sign and it's a mutable sign, is actually in its detriment. And it is in its detriment when you think of Sagittarius and, kind of sort of some of the significations of Sag. So let's talk about that. So Sag is Jupiter ruled, as I said before. It's more idealistic. It's a fire sign. It's a masculine sign. It's all about like law and like philosophy and ethics and like idealism. Jupiter is also our great benefic planet, so it has a tendency to bring lots of gifts. In a more extreme sense, it can bring excesses of things. It can be very self-indulgent. It's also considered a double-bodied sign, so half of it is a centaur, which kind of sort of is where like the beastie aspect of it, and then the other upper half is like the archer, which is a man with an arrow. In Sagittarius, you're kind of always kind of going back and forth between like what one would consider the human side, which is more of like intellect and idealism and wisdom and spirituality, and then the beastly side, which would be like self-indulgence and sensuality and all of the kind of earthier things that feel good. So when you have Mercury there, Mercury wants to, process the details. It wants to have quick information. It wants to share information quickly. Sagittarius energy definitely is focusing a lot more on the bigger things in life, the bigger ideals, long distance travel, long learning, going to a foreign country and learning a language or marrying somebody or just steeping yourself into culture. It's not like a survey, so to speak, of classes. It's a deep dive into things. And then there's this idea of like spirituality and the law and like that which is correct and like kind of sticking with that to a certain level. And so, with Mercury's like, let's bounce energy back and forth. I may agree with this today. I may not agree with it tomorrow. And, I'm not really sure how I feel about it. And I'm just going to kind of argue for argument's sake to play devil's advocate because that's what I like to do. So Sag energy is like, nah, I don't know if I like that. So a lot of times when you have Mercury in Sagittarius, it does have a tendency to have like in the more challenging aspects, like problems with the truth and how truth is interpreted and are you telling the truth and all that kind of sort of interesting energy. And I think largely that's because like when you're coming from like a mercurial space, like everything can be argued, and so I kind of sort of think of it a little bit like law, like you have the law and laws are written by Congress, right, at least here in the United States. And so then when you have lawyers, it's all about like interpreting the law, like, so here, this person is supposed to do this and this is what we're supposed to do, and then lawyers are like, yeah, but like when this circumstance circumstance, maybe, you know, the person can't do that because it's risky for their life, or because it'll risk somebody else's life, or maybe they're ethically against it. And so, you know, you're arguing points, and like if you win the argument and then you use other law and you interpret other laws, if you win the argument, then you win the case, whether it was like ethically right or not. Like ethics is not always, I mean, obviously like all lawyers have to take ethical classes, but there's a big question mark as to like how ethical things can be at times, you know, when you're talking about the law and the interpretation of the law. And the big joke with lawyers is lawyers, liars, you know, they kind of sort of sound similar. So we can see where those association, no offense to you lawyers, but you know, it is what it is. Positive things though that can come from this, especially if you have this natally, so don't feel sad about it. You can have a really great look at the big picture of things. You know, you're looking at the big picture because that tends to be more Jupiterian, Sagittarius, like, you know, what are the things that I want to create? I want to create this new world. I want to create this new big huge thing. I want my business to be like amazing. And so Mercury will then help you break down big ideas and chunk it down into like little to-dos. Like, how do I do that? It's like managing all of those things. So that can be great if you're able to kind of sort of balance that energy well. Good problem solving skills, I think, is just really great for that. And it's like, it really helps you figure out a way to like problem solve. You can be a really good problem solver for yourself, but you can also be a really good problem solver for other people. Excellent storytelling skills with this. And I'm going to name some celebs that have that, and you're going to see that too. But it's just the ability to be able to kind of sort of, you know, tell a story and paint like with this broad brushstrokes, but you're using like really specific language to be able to, you know, kind of tell that story. And I think it's kind of interesting too, because you have like Mercury and its fall in Pisces too. And that's another thing, like these beautiful storytelling skills that, you know, Mercury, when it's, even when it's in its like detriment or fall, it still has this ability to be like able to tell like beautiful tales and kind of like lean into like the beauty of language or the big picture of things. Also really good for teachers, public speakers, people who are teaching, professors, people who are kind of like giving information to others and breaking it down for, like, I think people that have this in a very strong placement and they're using it well can be highly effective at telling people or breaking down complex ideas and breaking them down into like small bites that people really understand and they kind of get. And so that can be fantastic. There also tends to be this kind of forever student aspect, like they always love learning and always love gathering more information. The challenges though with this, and there are some, is like I said, the truth can be variable, telling the truth, manipulating the truth, arguing what the truth could potentially be. There can be some dogmatic thinking with that just because of that Jupiterian aspect of Sagittarius. Like, this is the law, this is the ideal, this is the thing that's right. And there's not a lot of love for the negotiation or seeing every side of it. That definitely tends to be a more mercurial thing, but it can be challenging. Blunt, you know, just blot out the words and things. Just, you know, if you have this natally, you know, it's just sometimes too much information. Are very different than Mercury and Scorpio, which we've been in the energy of Mercury and Scorpio, right? Like where everything is very intentional. And so if a zinger lands, it was meant to. This one is not so much like that. It's kind of like a kid saying something inappropriate and everybody's like in shock, but too much information. TMI, you know, that Jupiterian aspect of making everything big and large and extra and just too much information. So whenever you have a excess conversation skills, which is great if you're teaching, but you can just keep talking and then just spill all the beans. So this is not a great secret keeping time because people will just feel the need to talk and fill the space. And like, you know, when you enjoy something, you enjoy it to the most. It's an excess. And that tends to be like with the benefic planets, how they can sometimes be a little bit not working for you as well, is because it's too much of the good thing, right? It reminds me of old spy movies where they would like talk to the person and like they got them drunk enough or talking them enough. They would like tell the names of all the people who work there, and the information to the safe would just be there. And it's that kind of energy. If you just get them feeling jovial enough, all the information comes out. So, and also too, with the excess conversation and all of that, it's kind of hard to hear when you're talking all the time. So the listening skills can be a bit challenged at that. Some celebs though, with this placement that works really well, or people or well-known people. Brene Brown has this, which I think is really cool. And she talks a lot about like the stories we tell ourselves, which kind of tend to come from the stories that people tell us, or, you know, what we've absorbed. We're telling ourselves these narratives and kind of sort of of breaking out of our personal narrative that's been rolling in our head, so that we can like change our narrative and then become different and then live in that difference. And so like she has a very strong Mercury and Sagittarius placement, which I think is cool. And that's kind of sort of the big idea to kind of sort of break down. But you hear everybody, the story we tell, you know, like they quote her all the time because it's just so useful, so succinct, and like to the point. And you know, like when someone's already done that work for you, all you have to do is just say it and people just kind of sort of wake up and get it. So she's been really successful in that, and probably largely due to that placement. We have Steven Spielberg, who's another really wonderful storyteller. We have Sarah Silverman. It's interesting. I know she's a comedian who sometimes like has a tendency, or so I've read, I haven't really listened to a lot of her stuff, to go like beyond what like the joke is here. The comfortability of the joke is here, and comedians most of the time go beyond that, but maybe she goes beyond what most comedians go. And a lot of people think that's hysterical and funny, especially if they like dark humor. And a lot of people think it's like way too far and that needed to be pulled back in. And you guys have conversations about that, but it's still a placement, and it's that kind of excess, but it sometimes works and then it sometimes gets you in trouble, you know, and you tend to, when you have that, you have both. You're like, wow, I went overboard and it was great. And then it's like, wow, I went overboard and it cost me something, you know. So we also have the Sun conjunct Mercury in Sagittarius. It's Cazimi, or in the heart of the Sun, on the 28th, and we can feel that now all the way till December 5th. So the Sun is our visible selves. It's our vitality, our health, our power, how we kind of move in our authority in the world. It also could signify people who have power and authority over us as well, if we're not feeling empowered. So it can be that too. So both Mercury and the Sun are conjunct in Sagittarius, and it will be Cazimi, like I said, on the 28th. And a Cazimi is when a planet essentially is conjunct at the exact same degree. It's considered to be like in the heart of the Sun. We're going to see them kind of like tracking together, the Sun and Mercury, well into next week. So positive things that can come from this. It's really great for the creative thinker, for creatives. Warm and lively conversations with people can be wonderful. Really a good time to share your point of view and how you feel about things, and ethically how you feel about things. Really important. Expressing yourself, expressing positivity, standing up for your point of view. Lots of communication, lots of emails, lots of texts, lots of newsletters and things like that that are going to be sent out. Mostly are going to be sent out by yourself. And it also can feel a little bit restless, like you want to move, you want to kind of sort of do things. If you work from home, you don't want to do that. You know, you might want to go out somewhere else and work and just kind of sort of move around, or have different clients, or work on some new projects, and just have a little bit of movement in that. Challenges that can come with it: you can have some mental blind spots. You can definitely be over opinionated, dominating world point of view, just because of that kind of Sagittarian, like, this is the law and this is what's best and I know. You can be overstimulated or have an overactive mind. You're thinking so much about things and processing so much information. And you also might just need to tell, like, there's a quality to this where it's like, I work out my issues by telling everybody things. And again, it goes back to that TMI kind of thing. It's like I'm telling everybody everything, and it's kind of like going out there to the ether. And maybe it was stuff that people either didn't want to know or they were totally uninterested in knowing. And it's just like, I just have to kind of like tell my story, you know, like very talk show host energy. It could be about conversations with the father, something that has to do about your father. If you have a father that is no longer, you know, in existence, it can be about the father, or male archetypes that are kind of like fathers to you. Yeah, it's just really important though with all of this with Mercury that you're just listening, because it's, again, just very difficult. A lot of these conversations can be very one way, you know, because it's hard to listen when you're trying to get out so much information. So in terms of next week, I wanted to talk about a couple of things that just to highlight some of the transits that are happening next week that we're going to be feeling over the weekend, for you to get a little bit of a heads up on. So on the 29th, Mars, which is still in the sign of Scorpio, is going to be trining Neptune, which is in Pisces. So we have this Mars-Neptune trine. So this is going to feel a lot like, you know, Mars essentially is in its home sign in Scorpio, has been giving us a lot of energy. And so whenever we have these trines to Neptune, Mars tends to be a little less active energetically, like in the body, and it tends to be more emotional, or maybe more so in the mind. So activities that have to do with like spirituality, things that have to do with kind of dreamy, or dreaming about things, or being in a dream state. Mars rules surgeons and athletes and soldiers and like military, and like people that are like fighting. There's aggressive archetypes that are associated with this. But we also forget sometimes that Mars rules martyrs. And essentially for a lot of people, that would be what a soldier is. They were going out and they're defending you and they're protecting you, you know, in the highest sense of what a soldier would do when they're doing the right thing. And they're sacrificing themselves. They put their lives on the line to protect home, to protect their home, to protect their land, to protect their country. And so there can be a quality of that, of martyrdom, a quality of like spiritual martyrdom that happens with that. Challenge with it, of course, is it's Neptune, and sometimes at least Neptune at this point will be retrograde, but then like the next day it's turning direct. So are you going out and fighting and sacrificing yourself for something, for an ideal that may or may not be true, you know? And that's the question. Like you thought you were going out there for one thing, to fight for something or to sacrifice for something, and the thing that you were fighting or sacrificing for is false. It's not real. And so that's the challenge. So you can have some like savior syndrome kind of egotistical things that happen with that, which reminds me a lot of the celebrity that like went to an impoverished country and like took all of these like selfies and photos of feeding the poor children and offered up this bowl which looked a lot like a dog bowl of food to the child, and it just was very offensive to a lot of people and kind of insensitive and a little bit egotistical. One of those kind of like selfies in poor places that people take, and they're just like, look at me, I'm hanging out with the people now, you know? And it's just kind of weird, this kind of weird vibe. Like you can help people and not be egotistical or weird about it. So just like, are you sacrificing something? What are you sacrificing for? Like, you know, are you sacrificing so that you look good? Is it an ego kind of thing? And, you know, that's okay, because Neptune kind of sort of is all about the dissolving of that, you know, eventually. That's going to happen anyway if with this transit. So Neptune is stationing direct on December 1st at 20 degrees in the sign of Pisces. You know, Neptune usually is retrograde about 6 months out of the year, and then it's direct the other 6 months. So we live with this energy for a long period. Most of us, probably a lot of us, are born, myself included, with Neptune retrograde. So for me, like retrograding Neptune, I kind of like, because I think things are more clear, whereas Neptune kind of clouds more things. And so sometimes you can be believing things that are not true. Sometimes it can cause a lot of delusions, where you create and you paint a portrait that might not exactly be real, but it's the ideal of what it is. A lot of people, modern astrologers, call Neptune a higher octave of Venus. So it would be Venus that's completely boundless, that loves in a sacred heart kind of way, everybody, everything, all of the time. It's very much in opposition in a lot of ways to Saturn, which at the time during traditional astrology, you know, Saturn was the last planet that was able to be seen by the visible eye. So it sort of kind of kept the bounds. It was like, this is the last place, so it's a boundary. And so Neptune really has this way of dissolving boundaries, dissolving things that you thought. It's very necessary when you need to have an ego death. It's very necessary when you need to shed the skin of trauma and like traumatic situations, things that you did. We talked about that, the stories that we tell ourselves, and we want to stop telling ourselves that story. It can be really good to kind of sort of like it dissolves that kind of concept and that idea. And it has this need sometimes to like merge with the truth, to merge with the collective consciousness, to merge with everybody, with everything that's going on. And it's slow moving, so we're all going to be kind of sort of like subtly seeing the change in this, but we definitely might be more in a circle of like, oh, you know, conspiracy theory or conspirituality and all of that. Like, you know, I'm coming up with all of this information and it's not exactly true, but some of it sounds good, or I want to bury my head because I don't want to deal with what's really happening. So I'm going to tell myself a story that makes me feel good because I don't want to like look at the reality that's happening. It's very easy to do. So we'll go into that a little bit more next week, but I just wanted you to know the energies that are coming up. So thank you so much for watching my video. I hope this was informative to you. I hope you got something out of this. If you did, make sure you comment below. Comment if you have any questions or anything like that. Make sure you like and subscribe to this channel, or if you're seeing it on Instagram, you can share and heart it and all that good stuff. So thank you so much for joining. If you guys have any questions, or if you would like to book a reading, my books are open. You can go to www.thewildwahine.com and find all of that information there. Thanks a lot for being here, and I'll see you in the next video.